What is up, people? Welcome to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I am just one of your fantastic hosts for this evening, Aaron Quinn, joined by my other half, I guess you can say at this point, Greg Thompson.
I always introduce my wife as my better half, so I'll take your lesser half. That's fine.
I said other, that's equals.
I like it.
Although you do carry me sometimes. That was a Twitter thing, and sometimes I carry you. So I do think we're equals in this.
I like it. We both have our strengths. We both have our areas. There's
I appreciate that
nerdy minutia that I go into that you take a nap, and
yeah.
We both have our areas that we bring to the table.
Absolutely. So we'll get into it here pretty quick today because I know people probably want to hear about Quinton Spain. It's that time of year where, if we're going to sign a guy, everybody's going to want to hear about it. So we'll definitely get into that here tonight. But before we get into it, I just want to let everybody know, thank you for joining us. The chat is already getting going. I'm seeing a lot of the same names in there, which is great. Make sure you share this with people that that are Bills fans that you think would enjoy this and get that chat rolling even more. We're really ramping up here to draft season, and part of the draft season that is going to be really special this year, Jordan Reed, one of our contributors, has launched his draft guide for pre-purchase, so you can pre-order his draft guide now. Go over to Cover One on Twitter. You'll see the post. Maybe we could get the link in there in the chat at some point tonight, but he's got his draft guide. It is over 200 prospects, full page reports, analysis of 200 prospects. I don't even know how one human being does this, but he managed to get it done. He's a fantastic contributor to Cover One. I got a sneak peek at some of the pages when I was helping him with the graphic design stuff. It's incredible work. I urge you to go do it. It's $10, but that $10 goes to a charity in Raleigh, a hunger prevention charity in Raleigh. So all the proceeds are going to charity. It's really a great deal. I urge everybody to head over, check that out, and buy it. And Greg, what else we got coming at Cover One right now?
No, so many different things. I mean, there's so many different players that I think come up, whether it's, you hear news that there's a upcoming visit with a player that you're not familiar with, or whatever it might be. I think that there's a huge opportunity to be able to, educate yourself, look and see who the information is, what that player is, what they have to offer. And it's just fantastic to keep yourself up to date. And then my favorite is the premium channel Slack. It's our own personal little Bills Twitter. Honestly, it's guys that are educated on what's going on, familiar with what the team is doing. They know what we're talking about, and honestly have become good friends. So it's something that I welcome any Bills fan to jump into, and something I think you'll really enjoy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And we just got more content pumping out, coming. So look forward to it. Also, while you're here, make sure that you head over to the YouTube page, subscribe to that, hit the little notification bell so that you're notified when we go live. It's going to be really helpful for us too, to know who's watching this. So get over there and do that. Subscribe and review on wherever you listen to your podcast. All that business stuff's done. Let's get right into this. Quinton Spain. I was kind of just going around my morning like normal, drinking my coffee, looking on Twitter, hoping something would come up, but didn't. Search Clowney again because I'm still hoping that rumor comes true. We oddly do that every day. And Quinton Spain signed. Adam Schefter reports early in the morning, signs a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills. I think you and I were both hoping for that. I know we talked about what are we going to talk about on this show today, and we said, well, let's look at the remaining free agents. First guy I wrote down was, Spain, Ansah, and then kind of so on and so forth. So it makes sense. It's a signing that I think everybody wanted after he visited, and it's official. How are you feeling?
I'm ecstatic. I'm really excited. I think, like you said, late into free agency this far, this is a much higher quality guy than you're normally going to get. And I think that we want to look at, it's interesting that he was still out there. He was an undrafted free agent for 4 years with Tennessee, so he never really made big-time NFL money. Obviously, big money for you or I, but not compared to his, compatriots there on the line. So I think that they were looking at this as his first chance to really cash in, to get a big-time check. And I think, honestly, his agent might have overshot his market a little bit. So then all of a sudden you had some other teams, sign some guys. The biggest hit for him was Tennessee snagged Roger Saffold, who's also a left guard. And I think that kind of lost out on their backup plan, was to go back to Tennessee. So I think that his market shriveled up a little bit. I'm curious to see what his contract comes out at. My guess is it's going to be somewhere closer to Ty and Secchi than it is to Feliciano or Long. So my guess is somewhere in that $4 to $5 million cap number with maybe the upside to hit $7 million with games played, but that kind of ballpark. So, I think it's really nice. It's crazy that we've signed 6 free agent offensive linemen, and now very likely are going to have 4 new starters. But certainly a pleasant surprise over a month, almost a full month into free agency.
Yeah, one thing I think that this signing has been really par for the course for the Bills this free agency. I compared the improvement of the offensive line on the Slack channel this morning to the improvement in the wide receiver room. We went from one of the worst, almost historically bad offenses with those 2 units to average NFL units, like real starting NFL caliber starters at these positions, which sounds crazy that is a huge improvement. And I'm not trying to knock what they've been able to do. That's a vast improvement, though, to go from one of the worst units at 2 positions on the offense and bring them both up to average. And that's a huge thing. But I do want fans maybe a little bit to pump the brakes on. I think I saw a lot of, all right, well, we got this other guy and we look at his PFF grade, we got Spain and we look at his PFF grade, and he's graded out really well at times throughout his career. So I get the excitement, but I don't think that this all of a sudden you have Ty Nsekhe and Quinton Spain and Deion Dawkins, and all of a sudden you're top 5 offensive line, top 10 offensive line unit in the league. I think the expectation should be right about average, and that could really be the difference in a few games if you go back and look last year at the offensive line play. So that's good enough for me and really matches the progress I wanted to see out of this team. How are you feeling? What's the temp in the water on that unit for you?
I think we talked about it at corner, and that, if a team went into a season with Kevin Johnson as your starting corner, that's not great. If you went into the season with Levi Wallace as your starter, that might not be great. If you went into the season with EJ Gaines as your starter, that might not be great. But when you go into a season with Kevin Johnson, Levi Wallace, and EJ Gaines, that's pretty good, because then you have depth, you have competition, they're pushing each other, you're able to get the best guy out on the field. If an injury happens, there's not a huge drop off. So I actually think the depth of the line really gives them an opportunity to have the 5 guys out there. There's a ton of flexibility. Spain is not a guy who's played a lot of different places. He's pretty much a left guard, and that is what he is. He's an enormous man. But the rest of the guys, I like the flexibility. John Feliciano can be the starting right guard or the backup center. Spencer Long can be the starting right guard or the backup center. Wyatt Teller can be the starting right guard. You have Waddle, who can play both sides or guard. You have Nsekhe, who can play both sides or guard. You have a lot of opportunity to get competition going and find the best 5 guys and get them out there to always be there. I do think there's a fine line there where you have to be careful, where we want there to be competition. We want to figure out who the best 5 guys are, but I'd love for them to figure that out relatively quickly to let the 5 guys gel together and play. So again, that's a little bit of a fine line. As you talked about, I think we were a little bit starstruck in that, oh my gosh, they're bringing in all these linemen. We went from the least money spent in the NFL, but we were so far behind everyone else in the least money that we're now the 21st ranked team in spending on offensive line. Yeah. We went from 32nd to 21st, and that's without Quinton Spain's contract in there. So let's say that jumps up to 17 or 18.
That's
so
right where they'll probably be.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to midpoint in spending. So, I think in the premium channel Slack, I listed out some of the warts for every single player in the worst case scenario, like Morse concussions, Nsekhe's age, Spencer Long's injuries, Feliciano not developing, Deion Dawkins staying in that sophomore slump, Wyatt Teller not getting any better, Quinton Spain not gelling with the team. I don't think it's likely that all of those happen. But I think now they've built enough depth that if 1 or 2 or even 3 of those things happen, they can still have 5 NFL caliber linemen out there and not some turnstile that's going to make Josh Allen run for his life. So the biggest thing is that, there's now 13 offensive linemen that are signed under contract with no one from the draft. And that, let's assume that Ike Boettger, Connor McDermott, Jeremiah Searles are out. That still leaves us with 10. So that means that now, Vlad Dukas and Russell Bodine likely are out. That's still 8 without anyone in the draft. If we draft anyone, you're now talking about 9 really quality guys, where Wyatt Teller is probably your 9th guy. Feliciano or Spencer Long are probably your 8th guy.
Yeah.
So it's just depth that we haven't seen in a long, long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think fans should be excited about it. I just want to make sure that I put it out there that it's kind of like I had a rant a little bit on Twitter about where expectation should be for this team. And I think that getting positions that were the worst on the team to average and adding depth should give us some excitement. But last year they were one of the worst teams. And I think you and I talked about being a 4-6 win team all along, and they ended up on the high side of that. If they're an average team and they're in that 6 to 8, 9 win team, and we know that Sean McDermott can get a lot out of less talent, they're still in that higher range, I think, which is good improvement. That's all the improvement I need to see heading forward and heading into 2020. The concern on this offensive line with me, and it's something that I saw a lot again on Twitter today, was people were kind of saying, well, we've got Quinton Spain, that you mentioned the numbers, the sheer amount of people that we got on the offensive line. That means that we really don't need offensive linemen in the draft. And I'm not going to say that it's the number one priority to get out of the draft, but I don't think that it precludes us from getting a young, solid offensive lineman if it falls to us, even still with the first pick. I know that that's probably not a popular idea, but if the guy falls, if the right guy falls and he is truly their best player available on the board, I don't think it precludes them from bringing in a top tier offensive lineman to this team. And you just let that competition roll as it goes. But how do you feel about adding a guy here through the draft, or if we now need to move on from that?
I think that the vast volume of free agent signings, and that's all you can call it, adding 18 players if you count Duke Williams, is an unbelievable number of players to add. What that did was allow him to go best player available, no matter what. So now, would I prefer that it's a defensive playmaker that I think could come in and really make a difference in where we probably still have our biggest hole in our rotational D tackle and rotational DN? Yes, that'd be my preference. But what he did here was allow them to go with whoever the best player on the board is. Now, I think that some of that, and he touched on, Brandon Beane touched on this in his interview at the owners meeting, in that, it's not as simple as just grades. You do take premium position, you do take team need and things like that when you're building your board. But once you build that board, you just let the draft come to you as it is. So if we have the right 8 guys get picked there and we stay at pick 9 and Juwan Taylor's our best guy, then they're going to take him. And is that crazy that we're going to add a 7th new offensive lineman? Sure. But if he's the best player, it's who they're going to take. So, I would say it's less likely that it's an offensive lineman now at 9, and that it is possible that does slightly tweak the tiers in the draft board going in. But I feel very confident we're going to add offensive linemen in the draft. Mm-hmm. It just, we will have to see how the board falls as to what round it is.
Yeah, I think my thing is, and I said this for wide receiver too, is none of the guys that they got keep me from taking another guy to bring in, right? None of them are that good outside of Mitch Morse, where it prevents you from adding to that room, whatever it is. And Eric brought up a good point in a thread on Twitter, talking about position importance. And offensive tackle is up there with defensive end and even defensive tackle as far as impact on the game and importance and moving forward. A guy that got brought up today was Dillard. If Dillard is there and he's truly that guy and he's a left tackle, even with Deion Dawkins there, Deion Dawkins doesn't prevent me from drafting the next franchise left tackle. He just hasn't played to that standard yet. So I'm not saying they have to do it or that's the number one priority. I definitely don't agree with that, but I'm just saying don't be surprised if the best player on their board is Juwan Taylor or Dillard or somebody like this and they say, hey, you know what? We're here. We got the picks. None of the guys that are on the roster are going to prevent me from making this pick. And that's okay.
Yeah, we talked about that with, when we were talking pre-free agency that, that's never going to be a sentence they say that, oh, we can't sign this guy because we have
Robert Foster,
or Robert Foster, whoever it is. The same thing applies for Ty Nsekhe. The same thing applies for John Feliciano. The same thing applies for Spencer Long. Those are not long-term fixtures on the offensive line. And I actually think that some of those guys, specifically Nsekhe at his age, 33, he'll turn 34 during the year. I think he's a fantastic guy. If we get a 2nd or 3rd or 4th round offensive tackle that we see some long-term potential in, that's the kind of guy you pair with Ty Nsekhe to learn from him, to groom and to be ready, and that you let Nsekhe play out his contract in 19 and 20, and then that's your starting guy in 2021. That's how good teams are built. That's how roster churn is set to work, and that, you know, maybe that's the guy we bring in there, and that, you know, we have him at the right spot.
Yeah, and obviously building up this offensive line shows that it's all about Josh Allen, right? Like we've seen that be the priority for this offseason. One of my concerns is this offensive line built more for the run game, and Shady and Frank Gore and whoever they draft or bring in for that other running back, because they brought in some huge, massive bodies. And I know a guy like Spain is a mauler and more of a run blocker. And we know Deion Dawkins has done more in the run game. Mitch Morse obviously has the pass protection background, but some of these guys are just big bodies that I think they want to move around in the run game. Is it going to be a unit that's better in that than it is in pass protection? And should that be a concern for us?
I think it's a fair question. I will say it seems like pass blocking was a priority. The two things that I saw were size obviously mattered. Every single guy they signed was larger than average for their size. Ty Nsekhe is a monster of a human. Mitch Morse is every prototype you want at center. Quinton Spain is 6'5", 335 at guard. That's huge.
Massive.
So obviously size was a priority. And then most of them graded better as pass blockers than run blockers. So normally when you think of size, you think of road grading run blockers. It was fairly consistent that most, except for maybe Feliciano, most of them graded better as pass blockers than run blockers. So I think that makes sense for the modern NFL and where we're going. I would hope that they can gel together and be strong from a run blocking standpoint as a unit. But I think it was balanced in how they tried to do it. Now, how that nets out into how they play together this year, you know, obviously we'll see. But it seemed like the size, and then again, I know you and I both we like the PFF stats. We, you know, have some concern with the grade sometimes. So they take that with a grain of salt. Some of that is based on, you know, PFF grades. But it did seem like they at least prioritized pass blocking from that standpoint.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, I do think there's a priority still in the run game, and I don't know, I'll have to check on some of the grades, but a guy like Spain, from what I saw in the highlights and the analysis that I've seen on him, he seems like a guy that's really going to pave the way in the run game. And if I'm Shady McCoy, I know that he tweeted out during that Alabama Clemson game about wanting some big bodies, and he deleted that tweet pretty quick, but somebody heard him at One Bills Drive, and they got Shady McCoy some big bodies. So I'm excited about that.
Awful lot. Now, I will say one other piece. If anyone is curious about Quinton Spain, go Google Tennessee offensive linemen at Predators games. I know Taylor Lewan is the one who got a lot of attention for it, but Quinton Spain was the guy who was there shirtless, chugging beers and drinking beer out of a catfish's mouth. He's a crazy dude, and his highlights are him just being a bouncer, throwing dudes out the club. Yeah. He is a lot of fun and an angry man.
And the last thing I'll say is I think a common theme of what Bean and McDermott have done is gotten guys in on these 1-year deals. I know you're excited about the possibility of comp picks down the road, but what I'm excited about is the prove it to us, right? Like the chip on your shoulder. Spain's a guy that's earned everything he's gotten in this league as an undrafted guy. So you already know he's got that built-in chip. Now he didn't quite hit on free agency, maybe like him and his agent thought. So now he's got an extra chip. And I think that is something that's not really quantifiable, but that Bean and McDermott are looking for in guys to say, hey, man, we'll give you the chance to prove it. Come here, compete. We're going to give you the option to compete and get the best out of you. And I think that's really one of these ways we always talk about Sean McDermott getting the best out of players and getting more out of less. I think this is one of the ways he does is find guys with chips and then find how to motivate that chip to get the most.
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. So there's cascading benefits to that because so out of the free agents they've added, 11 of them were on 1-year deals. So that's 11 guys on prove it deals coming in that are there. That also, like you said, the nerdy side of things. Going into this, there was no possibility that we were going to be in the comp pick formula next year. Obviously, we're not this year. We signed freaking 18 guys. Next year, I also thought there was no possibility because our only people coming up are Lorenzo Alexander, who already said he's going to retire, Jerry Hughes, who I think it's likely to be retained, LaShawn McCoy is a possibility, and then a handful of other guys that no one's going to want. Well, now we had just added 11 guys to that. So let's say we retain a handful of those. I could see them re-signing a guy like Quinton Spain back for another year. I could see them re-signing Le'Adrian Waddle as depth for another year. I could see them bringing back Jordan Phillips for another year. But let's say they let one of the cornerbacks walk, another one of the linemen walk. They let a handful of other guys go. All of a sudden now the actual comp pick formula comes into play where they could maybe go out and do one or two big splash signings, but let more guys sign with other teams than what we sign. And all of a sudden, I know that's something that Brandon Beane's talked about is now back in play. And ideally, that's how he's building this roster going forward, is that we draft guys, we have guys ready to step in like that Ty and Secchi deal. And in our mock draft later, I have a feeling we'll pick a developmental offensive lineman to show that example, that, you pair him behind there, you let Ty and Secchi walk, and all of a sudden you bring in the new guy to start, and that kind of thing will start happening as natural progression behind those guys. So, the 1-year deals, like you said, I think are great to make the players prove it. I also think it brings a lot to the table as far as testing it out, and that I bet out of those 11 guys that I bet it's likely 4 or 5 of them re-sign again in 2020, and then all of a sudden we can also let some of them walk and bring the comp pick into play. So it's just good stuff all around.
Absolutely. So there's still money to be made, to be spent here in free agency, and there's still time. And I don't know how much they're going to do pre-draft at this point. I think they want to take a look at the draft and see where they end up, but there's still some guys out there. And we talked about it a little bit this morning when we were discussing before the Spain thing, and said, what the heck are we going to go on and talk about tonight? Because it's really nothing. It's not been a long week. So,
well, don't forget about, Cinereese. We did bring in a star running back.
Yes. Probably not. I'm not going to talk about him.
If special teams player, Cinereese Perry, $800,000. He's our new Taiwan Jones, honestly.
Yeah, not even.
Yeah, he might be. He could make the roster. They gave him an entire $50,000 in signing bonus.
Yeah, I think he's just here to get through the summer reps, and if he really impresses, then great.
Maybe.
So there's some good names though out there. When I actually went back on the free agent list and started looking and really scrolling through, I said, man, wow, there's actually some options there if the draft doesn't pan out the way they want, or things just don't fall to them the way they want, or they move around a little too much, whatever the case is. I think there's some nice security blankets out there. Some of the guys that stood out to me, obviously Ziggy Ansah. He's coming up here, I think mid-month. So anytime here in the next couple weeks, he's going to have this other physical that all the teams are waiting on. I think it was April 15th. So very interested to see how that goes. And see if teams jump at that right away, or if they say, okay, great, physical came back great, we're still going to wait till the draft. I think there's a number of teams interested there and just waiting to see how that physical goes. We obviously know there was interest from the Bills. Do you think that Ansah is a particular guy that if the physical comes back, they say, all right, we had the deal structure, let's just get this done? Or they say, hey, you know what, we're going to pause and wait and see how things shake out?
I would say, similar to Quinton Spain, it doesn't seem like the Bills physically bring guys in for visits unless there's pretty legitimate interest. So I'm going to say that they've probably done the structure and are pretty close. And if the physical and medical checks out, especially because after the visit in New Orleans then signed 2 other defensive linemen already, I would say the Bills are the leader in the clubhouse, and that it's likely, if the medical checks out, that they would move pretty quickly and sign him. Now, we're never going to know that because we don't know what the medical results are going to be, and they're not going to share that with us. So we're just going to find out whether he signed or not. But I would say, just based on evidence here, there were not an awful lot of guys who visited the Bills and then didn't sign. So it seems like that's a pretty strong indicator for them that if they feel strong enough to bring a guy in-house, there's very legitimate interest, and they're going to pay, the market rate for guys. So I'm going to guess that if his physical and medical stuff checks out, he's the most likely of the remaining guys to be signed.
One guy that I'm shocked has still lasted through free agency, and maybe agent has kind of the same way overestimated his value. Timmy Jerrigan is a guy that I thought would easily land in that first half of the second wave of free agency right after the first day the dust settles. I thought he would for sure land on a team. It's an important position. He's played well in his career. What is going on there? Why haven't the Bills kicked the tires on this guy? Is the draft that heavy at defensive tackle where they're not really worried about it until after the draft? What's going on here?
It's tough to know. I mean, he was a stud in Baltimore. He went to Philly and was a huge part of their Super Bowl run. It was a pretty nasty injury last year. So, he only played 3 games last year, had to have some, pretty serious surgery. Maybe that hasn't checked out well. I don't know for sure, why else he would be out there, because it's kind of weird that he hasn't yet. So he's my number one guy. He is my number one wish list. He is the exact Kyle Williams replacement that I wanted going into. He was one of the guys I wanted like day one free agent. So the fact that he's still out there is weird. Philadelphia already was same idea as we talked about with Spain and signing Roger Saffold. Philadelphia already signed Malik Jackson, so I think it kind of closed off his return there. I kind of assumed that he'd be welcomed back to Baltimore after spending the first 3 years of his career there. It's weird to me that I just don't really understand why he's still out there, and I'm just going to assume that it has to do with the injury and that there's more to it than what we know of. So I just don't know.
I agree, but at this point, you would think the deal would be good enough there to get a 1 year, really cheap deal that you can protect the team. And if he doesn't play games, he doesn't really get paid. And so, because it's been long enough where the interest, the water is perfect for a guy like Bean to come to make a deal. So he's really the one that stands out to me right now. Obviously, Sue is out there. I don't like that fit for Buffalo. I just don't think he's a good fit for what they're trying to do.
I would be shocked if he was a McDermott guy.
Yeah, I don't think he is. And so it's weird, though, that he hasn't signed to. He's another guy, but not as appealing to me as Jerrigan, and wondering why. So a very interesting one, because definitely a position of need for the Bills. And both Ansah and Jerrigan are guys that we're talking right now. Probably 2 of the top 3 priorities to get out of this draft are those positions. And you have 2 guys sitting there where you could do the same thing they did with the wide receiver room and the offensive line and the cornerback room, is bring these 2 vets in and say, hey, we're going to give you a chance to compete and start for the job. But if we draft a guy, we draft a guy. Like, it still doesn't prevent you from drafting those guys, but it gives you, going into the draft, starting NFL caliber players.
Oh, the exact same thing we talked about with the offensive line. It doesn't stop us from taking anybody, but if we don't get a lineman, we're fine right now.
Right.
I don't feel that way with defensive tackle or defensive end. So I agree completely that if we, whether it's I think Ansah has more upside because of his, there's injury risk, but he could be a legit starting caliber guy opposite Jerry. There's rotational guys lower, like a Adrian Claiborne or a Shane Ray or a Nick Perry or Derek Morgan. So I think there's some filler guys there that if it doesn't fall right, we could go get one of those kind of players. But yeah, those were, you hit on my exact ones. I agree completely. I don't think Ndamukong Suh is a realistic target. I would love to get Timmy Jernigan. I think that he is an ideal fit for us. And if the medical checks out, he would be great. I think that Ansah is the most realistic just because of already coming in and already having, pretty in-depth contact with the agent. So, beyond that, I kind of looked to see if there was any linebackers that were there.
I didn't see anything for linebackers.
There was nothing. I don't really want anything to do with Jamie Collins.
No.
Then you're getting into guys who I've never heard of, and we already signed Mo Alexander to kind of be the backup rotational guy, and we already have Julian Stanford. So there wasn't anybody else special that I saw there. So
after the draft, there's a couple of guys that say you get a stud at defensive tackle or defensive end. There's a couple of guys I would still maybe consider allowing to come in for camp and kick out, see if they've got anything left as rotational guys. Corey Luggett.
Leggett or Luggett.
Leggett. I don't know how to say it. I'll butcher it all day. But I think he's a guy that I would say, hey, man, you've got some proven production in the league. Nobody's taking a waiver on you. Come in for a camp and see what you got. Put something on tape. And if you stick, you stick. Great. Ricky Jean Francois is a guy that is not going to be an awesome player, but he could come in and be a rotational guy. And I had heard over and over again the season he was with the Patriots of Bill Belichick speaking so highly of his football intelligence, and just knowing that every time he was out on the field that he wasn't going to be a guy that was going to make the mistake. So that's the kind of rotational depth that I want. So if he's a guy that they bring in, I'm totally for that. I love that kind of guy in rotation. He's not going to wow you or blow up plays all the time, but he's going to do the right thing and not screw it up. And Coney Ealy's an interesting one because he obviously has a history with the Panthers, bounced around the league. Some top teams really wanted him. He hasn't been able to stick like he did in Carolina. What's going on with him?
Now I will say the fans always fall on the homerish side with the Panthers connection. They're just going to bring in all their Panthers guys. What you have to realize is that connection means they know them better. So if there's players they don't sign, that's probably for a reason too.
Sure.
So Coney Ealy
they put in a waiver on him
out there. I think so. I think so. So yeah, I think there's a handful. There's always that kind of whatever you would call it, the fifth wave of free agency that happens, like you said, after the draft. Let's see how it shakes out. I think Ziggy Ansah, Jernigan, Sue, some of those remaining higher end guys are people who are going to want to find a landing spot before the draft because that could really close off their options. Everybody else is going to have to wait to see who didn't get the player that they thought they might. And hey, you can now try to, because they're going to try to find the team that has the best chance to make the roster. Whereas Jernigan and Sue and Ansah, they know they're going to make a roster.
Now there's two guys on the other side of the ball where this has happened to us in a number of drafts. You don't land one of the top 3 tight ends in the draft. You're heading in. It's not great after that with tight ends in the draft. There's some guys that have major flaws and some capabilities. Do you think you miss out on those 3 and you don't really want to reach for that position? You're kind of stuck. There's Max Williams is still out there, who is a guy that in the first wave of free agency, people were thinking, hey, this might be a guy like Croft. Is Max Williams a guy that you then bring in and say, hey, come in and compete with the tight end room? And if you stick, you stick. Safarian Jenkins is out there. I don't think he's a process kind of guy.
Same idea.
God, I love that athleticism in the draft.
Yeah, same idea as Sue, but I don't see him as a fit.
No, I don't either. But Max Williams, is that a guy, if you strike out on tight end in this draft? Because if you don't pick one quick and maybe even reach, you might miss out.
I agree completely. I actually don't love anyone after that top 3 in the draft. I feel confident they will have a minimum of 4, if not 5 guys. And obviously one of those might be an undrafted free agent afterwards. So I feel pretty strongly they're going to bring someone in. We touched on this a couple weeks ago. I don't think it's crazy that Duke Williams' best chance to make the roster might be kind of as a hybrid H-back move tight end. So I think that's a non-zero chance. You know how I like those. There's a non-zero chance that's his best chance is to fight out with Eric Fisher to be tight end 3 if we don't snag someone in the draft. I think it's relatively moot. I do think we're going to draft one. But there is a chance I could see someone like a Max Williams or even a Marquise Gray, who I think spent a minute on our roster.
He did, yeah.
Richard Rodgers is a name that some people recognize from the Packers. So there's some people that we could give a flyer on. Lance Kendricks is a name people have heard. So I think Safarian Jenkins is the best guy available, but he's also not very process oriented. It doesn't seem it has had some pretty significant off-field issues. But I think it's certain that we're going to have 4 or 5 tight ends going to camp, and we only have 3 on the roster right now. So whether that ends up being a drafted guy, which I think is more likely, or one of those remaining free agent guys, I do think that we'll see it.
Yeah, and there's a couple of, obviously with signing Quinton Spain guys, there's a couple veteran interior line guys left in Chance Warmack, who didn't live up to his draft status, but still is a vet, and the teams have shown that they like that. He's still sitting out there, and a guy that we had for a long time played fantastic for us, maybe a little over the age of his prime, well past his prime, and doesn't have a whole lot left. And Andy Levitre are guys out there that I had written down where if they missed out on Spain, maybe you just bring that guy in to see if he's got anything left in the tank. But I don't see it for the Bills at this point, but just some interesting names that are still kind of floating around.
Yeah, I said that the Bills were done signing offensive linemen 4 offensive linemen ago.
Sure.
So apparently we signed all the offensive linemen. So I'm done saying that we're done.
And the one guy that I still want is out there is Ty Montgomery. I wanted him early on in free agency. He's still out there. I still think, as far as the running backs in free agency go, that he's the best fit and that you can get him for nothing, and that it doesn't hurt to get him on some nothing deal and let him come in here and compete to be on the roster. And if he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it. But nobody else is biting to get him. I still like that fit. I think Dable could use a guy like that, and it would give you that protection where if you miss this draft, or if the guy that you get is a Bryce Love and a guy like that, then you still have 3 running backs going into the year and you redshirt Bryce Love. And I'm totally okay with that. But I think the off the field concerns that people would say, hey, the process, he doesn't fit the process. I don't believe in that at all, because I really think that Ty Montgomery is a guy that does fit the process. McCarthy was awful in Green Bay. My dad's a Packers fan. I follow them closely. It was nothing about managing running backs. Rodgers spoke to it. So I don't mind what happened with Ty Montgomery there. And he never had any other issues in college or anywhere else. I don't get he's not a process guy.
Yeah. And I mean, I go on my rants all the time in the premium channel Slack about stop paying running backs, but we're past that phase in free agency now that anybody we bring in is on a super cheap deal. So if we don't land a guy, heck, I don't think TJ Yeldon is signed with anybody yet. So there's other guys out there that, Bilal Powell is still out there. I think that role, that Buck Allen, Ty Montgomery kind of receiving back role, is the one that I'd like to see them still fill. My strong preference is that it's a drafted guy that can develop behind the mentorship you have with Frank Gore and LaShawn McCoy and be in his second year next year, when I think you need to draft another guy. But I also, maybe the board doesn't fall that way, and maybe they end up bringing in a different guy there. So, yeah, Spencer Ware, TJ Yeldon, Ty Montgomery, Bilal Powell, Buck Allen. If we strike out in the draft, by all means, I'm good to bring in one of those guys. Yeah,
and like you said, you're not going to pay these guys much. And I do think, obviously, they had Lovin on a visit. If you redshirt that guy, that's fine. And another thing, too, like it's really going to see how they fall in the draft, because if you draft a running back, none of these running backs are fantastic in this draft. And if you draft a guy in the 5th round, there's a good chance he's not the guy. It's nice to draft and you keep doing it and you keep pulling the trigger on some of these mid to late round guys and you hope one sticks. But they're going to have to prove it in camp. And I don't mind having Ty Montgomery split carries with a 5th round draft pick and figure out who's the best guy to keep on the team this year. That doesn't bother me at all to do that. And then you cut Ty Montgomery if he doesn't lights out take the job, you know what I mean? So, right. And you don't lose anything because it's a cheap deal. So I don't mind them. I know Ryan Thomas here from the Ryan Thomas podcast is in here talking about adding a couple running backs. Camp is long and you have 2 older guys up at the top of that don't need to prove anything and don't need to prove the carries. So I don't mind bringing in a couple guys on this roster to get through camp.
Yeah, I'm fine with LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore getting no carries all the camp. Just let him sit in the rocking chair and watch, and we're totally good.
Yeah, you guys are great. These Arnold Palmers are killing it.
Are you ready to transition into our 3rd mock draft?
I've never done one of these, so I think I'm ready. We'll try it out.
All right, guys. Something that you guys have been calling for a lot. I know Ron Beck and a handful of the guys in the chat have already been calling for it tonight. We are going to do our first mock draft with a trade. Because of the nature of how the software works, I've had to kind of set it up ahead of time to do that trade. I think this is a realistic haul. So I'm going to lay out the trade for you here, Aaron, and you let me know how you feel about it. The Bills have traded down pre-draft from pick 9. They have traded our 9th pick along with our later 4th round pick and our extra 7th round pick. And we have gotten the Redskins 15th pick and their 2 3rd rounders. So we got their 3rd round pick number 12 and their 3rd round pick number 32. From a draft trade chart, it was in the Bills' favor. I think it's something that's realistic. I'd love to get a 2nd rounder, but I think getting 2 3rd rounders is pretty good. And I think also Bean is going to be willing to give up some of our picks in return, because we certainly don't need 13 picks when we already have 10. So I think swapping in our later 4th and our extra 7th to get those 2 3rd rounders, I thought was a pretty good haul.
No, it is a good haul, and I would still even be fine with trading back up into the 3rd round. And I've wanted that all along in this draft, is if any of the trades I want the most, it's to trade back into the third round. So getting the 2/3 is cool with me. I still I look at trade scenarios, and by the day that passes, I think they're less likely than they were a month ago, or so on and so forth. I think obviously trades are going to happen. It's historical precedence that trades happen. I just don't know how likely it is that a team needs to get to 9 where the Bills sit to do anything that they want to do. So unless something crazy happens and the board falls in a certain way, or somebody falls in love with Dwayne Haskins, or Murray falls, something crazy happens, I just don't think that you need to get up there. So, but let's do it. We got up that we moved back, and Washington's taking Dwayne Haskins, I guess.
Yeah. We'll assume what they're going to do here. I'm going to switch over and screen share to the software so we can kind of see what everyone is doing and where it goes. I'm going to resume the draft here. So we are now going to be up at pick 15. And it actually fell pretty favorably for us. We had some good picks fall in between there.
So who'd they trade up for?
Oddly, we're not going to talk about this. In theory, they traded up for Cleveland Farrell, which is insane. But we'll let the computer program do what they do. So in this scenario, we do have Noah Fant on the board. We do still have Montez Sweat and Juwan Taylor on the board. 2 guys that we've already drafted. Brian Burns is there. Andre Dillard's a guy that's been talked about quite a bit. I actually really like the idea of trading back and then getting one of the tight ends. So right now that'd be my proposal. In reality, it'd be real hard for me to pass on Montez Sweat. What are your thoughts on who we pick there?
For the sake of the show, I don't know whose board we went with here.
I took the CBS aggregate.
I'm seeing Jeffrey Simmons so high up, obviously.
Yeah, some of these are, and the aggregate might be maybe some outdated ones for him. He might be pushed a little lower.
Sure. I would say for the sake of this podcast, let's pretend that Sweat isn't there, because realistically I just don't see it unless he gets caught with a grass mask Instagram video somewhere. It comes out on draft night. I don't see him falling to this poor part of the draft. So I'm totally in agreement with you, and I actually said in the Slack channel today that I think it's getting to the point in the draft season where I'm overanalyzing things, and that I think that I'm totally on board with Noah Fant over Hawkinson, just as where I can move him around on the field weapon. And I don't know if that's just from watching too much different YouTube clips as I'm going to bed at night. But I like this. I like Noah Fant here, and it assures you that you get one of these top 3 that we just talked about earlier.
I agree. I think that it shakes out well. So everybody can settle down. In reality, I might lean heavily towards Sweat, but I think for the exercise here, trading down to 15, we traded down. I did this trade pre-draft. In theory, Nick Bosa was there at pick 9, which is just insane. So some of this software, is a little wonky and who is available. So I think this is a good exercise for us to do. So we're going to pick Noah Fant at 15, which I think is right in target with who we would trade down for, and really gives us an awesome weapon for Josh Allen. So
yeah, and in a real world scenario, I do think at that 15 pick that some of these big wide receivers start to come in and play in the mid first round, guys that I wouldn't take. I know it sounds silly. I wouldn't take them at 9, but I'd take them at 15. I think they start to come into play. And Christian Wilkins, if he's there, I think he becomes very much in play at 15, depending on the different scenarios.
Absolutely. And Wilkins actually lasted a little while there. So again, we've been offered more trades. I think we're going to try to settle down here and not go too crazy.
You can get 100 picks out of this.
Yes, and we've done it. We the premium channel Slack has its own room just for mock drafts, and we have some where people have walked away with 25 players because we traded down so many times. Yeah. So the last handful of picks before, again, I think intelligently we did make that move for Noah Fant because Irv Smith went 2 picks before us. Jeffrey Simmons, another guy that both of us like. Dexter Lawrence, a nice guy, potential second round. Byron Murphy went early. So some really talented guys went right before us. Our board, how it's shaking out here. We have, let's look at some of the cornerbacks. Rock Ya-Sin is out there. From an edge standpoint, Jalen Ferguson. Most of the top-end defensive tackles are gone. Chris Lindstrom is there, who is a very strong option. Wide receivers, we have a handful of the strong guys there, N'Keal Harry, Hakeem Butler, and J.J. Osega-Whiteside. Going tight end early, I would say I would lean towards defense with this pick. So Jalen Ferguson would be an option. Rock Ya-Sin again as a potential option. Who's Chris Lindstrom is probably the best guy on the board overall from a value standpoint.
Yeah, I would honestly want to. If I had to say on that, I would say Lindstrom being best player available, and you still do need another guard. And like we said, that nobody on the offensive line. I really think the best player available is still in play. And we talked about some of these free agents that you can get. I don't know that Ferguson does a lot more for me than Ziggy Ansah this year in 2019. So I don't know. I would lean towards that, or even Harry sitting there's tough, man, because I think he's also going to be one of those guys that is really actually in the late first round. So either one of those guys, I think. I know that's a little offensive heavy. I agree with you. So this is the hard part about what the draft room and what they end up going through is you have some needs on defense. You've gone very heavy on offense in the free agency. Do you then follow that up with back-to-back offensive picks?
I think that it's a possibility. I think that Bean did this on purpose to be able to give him the option to take the best player available so that if it falls this way, he's able to do that. With so many right now, I would say I actually don't love A.J. Brown, but he's a good value as well. With N'Keal Harry, Arcega-Whiteside, Hakeem Butler, and A.J. Brown all left, I would actually play this out, and I won't play around with it a lot. I think this is a scenario where they make the pick at 40, and then with the ammo they picked up, maybe look at getting back into the late second to take one of those guys.
Sure.
So I might try to play around with that quickly here to see if we're able to move back up and get one of those guys. So that would be my proposal: is we take Chris Lindstrom as the best guy on the board, and then try to jump back up.
And Lindstrom's great. You have Spain on a 1-year deal, and you have nobody really on the right side that is going to be the guy. And I think Lindstrom fits the process better than anybody I'm looking at on the board right now.
All right, we'll go with that pick. I'm going to let a handful go here. And when we get into the later 50s, if all of our guys are still there, or a handful of them, maybe we try to jump back up here. And N'Keal Harry did go. Deebo Samuel went. Taylor Rapp went. Let's maybe jump here. So I'm going to propose a trade real quick. I'm only going to try this once or twice. We'll offer 2 of the third rounders to be able to jump back up with. Hold on. Sorry, I need to check who's actually picking right now. All right, we'll keep going here because I got to be able to see who's on the board. All right, now I know who's on the board with the Patriots.
Oof, Patriots are going to make us pay, man. They're not giving in. Belichick's a shrewd man.
Okay. So I did move back up to be able to take, in this scenario, Hakeem Butler. So we will open this back up. I'm assuming that would be the choice here in this scenario. And I think this is a realistic scenario where they would look to add that kind of ammo to get back up here and be able to add that kind of talent. So whether it was a N'Keal Harry or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside or A.J. Brown, being able to add that kind of talent is what they're looking for to be able to do here. And with what they picked up, they were able to do that with still having some pretty strong players available here in what they added. So we're now back up in the third. We've now added 3 straight offensive players: Noah Fant, Chris Lindstrom, and Hakeem Butler. So I think we need to start leaning a little more defensive here. Kalen Saunders and Rennell Wren are both names that both of us like. Jalen Jelks is there. Max Crosby is also there. And named Ben Banagu is another strong name there. So in the next couple picks here, I think we have a chance to add someone pretty talented there. Justin Lane is a cornerback that we've seen thrown around in possibly the late first. So having him available in the third round is pretty strong talent. I would say Lane is a pretty strong option. Kalen Saunders would be one that I would be comfortable with. And then my next pick, I'm going to be looking for Max Crosby in my mind.
Can you, just for shits and giggles, show me running backs? I know we've gone heavy on offense, but if we're really truly going best player available here, I just want to see who's here.
David Montgomery is there at the top.
Yeah, Montgomery being in there and Sanders being there. I think Sanders is rated a little low on this.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would have a hard time not going running back in round 3. I think that the historical production of guys in the first 3 rounds is much greater than it is when you start to get into round 5 and later. Obviously the deal's better. So I'd have a hard time not going running back here if we're looking to leave the draft with one. I think just based on the ratings of this board that we're going to be able to pick up a lot of talent with the rest of our picks on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I would say I would rather wait because I think that we can still get a talented running back coming up there, but Montgomery is really good. That would be where I'd come down to, is if we went someone this high, it would need to be someone the talent of Montgomery. I would lean towards Justin Lane just because I've seen him in the late first and early second and a really strong cornerback, and have not picking any defensive player yet. I think that would be worthwhile, but I could see Montgomery being worth it in the third.
Sure. Yeah. I'm up for whatever you're up for. You're steering the wheel.
All right. You can take control next week. We'll go with Justin Lane. I do think that's the pick that Bean would make, especially if we started offense. I think McDermott would be just staring daggers through him in the draft room, waiting for a defensive player. Let's see who still makes it to us in the next pick with a potential running back. We also can then look at who's still there from a defensive line standpoint. We did lose out on Kalen Saunders, but Rennell Wren is still there. We do still have Max Crosby still there as well. So let's see who's available here. We only have 1 4th-round pick now because we gave up one of them moving back up into the late second. And David Montgomery went into the 4th, so he was available there for a while.
My boy McLaurin.
Yeah, McLaurin staring at us there. I don't know that they'd go with a second guy yet from a running back standpoint, or from a wide receiver standpoint.
No.
We lost some defensive linemen there. Dalen Mack coming up in a little bit. I really like Max Crosby. I think that's a potential strong pick here in the 4th round. That's a guy that Eric likes a lot. I just don't know the name of any linebacker, so I usually take Blake Cashman later on just because he's a name that I know.
Is Edwards gone yet? Safety?
No, Mike Edwards from Kentucky is there. And that's a guy that was a visit as well.
Also, as Eric pointed out, a guy that played a lot of slot cornerback, plays a lot like Poyer. I think that's a guy you got to look at maybe.
I think from a draft board standpoint, he might be a guy we can get with that first 5th round pick. It's risky, but is a guy that's there. I think just from a visit standpoint and from the measurables and the fact that Eric likes him a lot, I think I take Max Crosby every single time at this first 4th round pick. I think that he's a great talent and a guy that we can go. And I'd love to see Edwards make it to the next pick, especially with his potential from a special team standpoint and what they can do. Nate Davis just went. I know that's a guard that's visited. David Sills, a receiver out of West Virginia that a lot of people like. Hometown boy Tyree Jackson just went. We did lose Miles Sanders there, so that was a running back that was potentially in play.
Yeah, I think this is the area of the draft where I start to get uncomfortable at running back as far as a guy that you bring in to be the future.
Sure.
And so this is a scenario though where it's like, okay, you in these next couple of picks, you take a guy, but then we go and call a Ty Montgomery or TJ Yeldon and say, hey, we ended up with taking this guy, but we want to bring you in and compete for this job.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect example. I actually really like 2 or 3 of the guys that were here, and in successive picks, Elijah Holyfield, Justice Hill, Rodney Anderson, Bryce Love, and Mike Weber all went.
You end up on the wrong side of a run.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's what happens when, I kind of rolled the dice hoping we could wait to this area and now missed out. And that might happen here. But I think one of the guys we were targeting here, Mike Edwards, did make it. And I think that's a slam dunk of a pick.
Yeah, I think you got to take him just for the versatility. You add another guy that can come in and play cornerback. And I think that he would be an upgrade of some of the safety depth we have already.
Everybody's yelling at me that I should have got the running back.
That's all right.
Let's step back and look at it now, though. This later 5th round pick is about the latest that I ever look at it. And there are a couple names. So Raquel Armstead is an interesting name. Divine Ozigbo is an interesting name. I like Alex Barnes out of Kansas State. They have him rated incredibly low, but I like him a lot. Miles Gaskins, are any of those names that interest you if we took a later flyer as a running back here?
I also like Higdon, but that might be the Michigan homer in me. He's not anybody that's going to wow you athletically. I think he's just got nice patience and footwork and knows how to find the extra yards. So I think for me, it would be between him and Ozigbo. And I'd be happy waiting and seeing if Zigbo's there.
Sure.
At this point in the draft, I'm really not just leaving with a running back just to have a rookie running back. If the right guy falls to me, I'm definitely going to take him there, but I'm still in best player available mode.
Now, in my mind, the best player available falls to these two players: Dalen Mack at defensive tackle from Texas A&M, and Daniel Wise, who's actually the younger brother of Dietrich Wise from the Patriots. Really flashed at the East-West game and earned an invite to the Senior Bowl. So Daniel Wise or Dalen Mack, I think, where we haven't taken a defensive tackle yet, I think those would be really good values this late.
I would say Wise, even though he's much further down the board in this rating, I think he's a little bit more versatile of a player. He's got more versatility, which I like. If I'm taking a guy here, he better be versatile.
Yeah, I think that's a nice pick, and I think it gives us that option. If Ozigbo's there in the 6th, I think that he's a potential pick for us. I think that that's still worthwhile. But now you're getting into kind of flyer territory. Just to kind of recap while this is running down, we've taken a tight end in Noah Fant. Chris Lindstrom traded back up to be able to get Hakeem Butler late in the 2nd, added Justin Lane in the 3rd, added Max Crosby in the 4th, safety Mike Edwards in the 5th, and then Daniel Wise with that later 5th round pick. We're now at our last 2 picks. With the 6th round here, again, we're kind of in flyer territory. So Martez Ivy is an interesting name. We've only taken one offensive lineman. That's a developmental tackle. He plays on the left side opposite of Juwan Taylor. So that's an interesting name. Again, Blake Cashman is a really strong potential special teams contributor earlier on. I think that he's a name that we could see later on here. And some people, I've seen him much higher in some boards, but a lot of sites have him fairly low and still some development there. From a running back standpoint, Divine Ozigbo still is there. So I'd say it'd be between Ozigbo and Cashman to me. What are you thinking, Aaron?
I think I'd go with Cashman at this point, just because if he pans out as a depth linebacker, you need that. But at the very least, I think he's going to be more of an immediate contributor on teams than Ozigbo is going to be an immediate contributor to this team in any way.
Sure, I agree. So we'll look here as we get to our final pick. Again, I traded away one of the 7th round picks to be able to do that package to get the 2/3 dropping down to 15th through there. And honestly, this isn't crazy. Last year Philip Lindsay wasn't drafted, and there's talent at running back all the time. I think Alex Barnes and Divine Ozigbo are both worthwhile. So if one of them's there, that's as much value in the 7th round as you're going to get anywhere else.
Right. Hurd's another interesting guy. I know we've taken a wide receiver, but if you're back here and a guy falls to you, bring him in. Who cares?
I actually think he might. I was looking at him. Funny, Divine Ozigbo did finally go. Tony Pollard did finally go. So again, waiting on Jalen Hurd did go. So a handful there. We had messed around. I don't think that I understand why some people look at kickers and punters. I don't know that it's necessary. I know one of our podcast brethren, Joe Marino, loves Mitch Wisnowski. I'm not here to draft a punter, I don't think. And I agree with bringing in a kicker to make sure that Stephen Hauschka's back is healthy, but I don't want to spend a draft pick on it. In this scenario, I really would take Alex Barnes. I think that he tested off the charts and showed some potential. And if it doesn't work out, it's a 7th round pick and it's not going to lose you anything.
Sure. Yeah, I really don't care about these 7th round picks. I know that sounds terrible, but these are guys that are, with as many players that are on this roster, unless somebody really shows out in camp, these are going to be guys that are almost the same as undrafted free agents and camp bodies.
So for their chances of making the roster, I agree completely. I think that it's going to be tough for a 7th round pick to make the roster and to be able to go that route. I am going to step back from the screen share here. We should be back to normal from a broadcast standpoint, but being able to kind of look at, what we brought together as a haul here, I'll kind of talk through some of the options of where we ended up here. I think that it worked out really well from what we were, trying to put together. We did do our first one with a trade back. So we traded our 1st, our 4th, and our 7th for Washington's 15th. Pick, and then their 2 third-rounders. We took Noah Fant at the pick number 15. At pick 40, we stayed there and took Chris Lindstrom. We then waited, and at the end of the 2nd round, we traded a couple of those extra thirds to move back up and snagged Hakeem Butler. At our standard third round pick, we snagged Justin Lane, who is a very highly rated cornerback that was there. We then in the fourth round took Max Crosby. In the fifth round took Mike Edwards. Later in the fifth round took Daniel Wise. In the sixth round, Blake Cashman. I think after starting offense, we then went 5 straight defensive players. But I think walking out with 5 defenders and 4 offensive players was a nice haul. The moves that we had also limited us to only 9 picks, which I think is at least back towards the right direction of fewer players having a chance to make the roster. I could totally see a couple of these day 3 picks moved for a 2020 future pick. But how do you feel about the haul that we made here?
I think top heavy wise, it's really good. I think maybe like a guy like Crosby, Lane, or Edwards, one of those guys is going to be a guy. I think they've done a really good job with Matt Milano and Taron Johnson of finding guys that nobody else is really thinking of that just fit the scheme. And I think one of those types of picks is going to stick. But the pick I think I love the most is Lindstrom at 40. I think right now he's my target. If Simmons isn't there at 40, Lindstrom's the guy. And even with the signing today, Lindstrom, that needle didn't move for me. So I like that value there. Butler in the third, I don't think he makes it. Or Butler later in the second, I don't think he makes it that far anyway. I think there's going to be an early run on the top wide receiver, so I don't know that he makes it there. If he's there, that's a great value. I don't know that, one, he's going to be there, or he's the kind of guy you trade up for. But if he's there, it's going to be really hard to not move up and get one of the bigger bodied guys, because that's really the one thing we don't have. I don't think anybody in the wide receiver room kept them from getting a wide receiver. And if you're going to go get one, you got to get something a little bit different than you have, which is a guy that can go up, jump ball with some of Josh Allen's off target, inaccurate throws. And he's shown on tape, while he has a lot of flaws, the one flaw he doesn't have is to be able to go up and rip the ball out of the air.
Yeah, no, I think that the talent that we got here, again, like I said, Lindstrom's a stud, catch radius guys in Fant and Butler, and then some versatile defenders that I think can come in and really add to what we have here. I'd be ecstatic if they had a haul like this.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with every mock draft I've done. I don't know about you, but everyone I go, hey man, we're a real competitor now. So
that's what. Yeah, that's what Bean has done with this level of, free agency haul. They've been able to allow us to have the flexibility to just take the best guy there. We don't need to feel pigeonholed into looking at those things. I want offensive linemen. I'd like a big receiver. I think we need a D tackle and a D end. I'd like a tight end. But we have so much flexibility with what we've done in free agency that it really just opens up all the doors.
Yeah, and we also talked about that there's flexibility beyond the draft and free agency, or maybe pre-free agency here with bringing in an Ansa or Timmy Jerrigan. So if you don't get one of those top defensive tackles, the top defensive ends, you still have the ability to maybe bring another guy in that can at least get you through 2019 and then get you into the next draft where we're still going to have good draft capital and a ton of assets. So the Bills have really put themselves flexibility wise in a great position to say, you know what, let's let this just fall to us and take the best players available and try to really bring in some game changers. I think of Noah Fant, Lindstrom, and Butler are all game changers, and we've moved the needle of this roster up from a pretty bad roster overall to average. And if you add a couple game changers to that with a Nakeem Butler and a Noah Fant, that really starts to get you talking about moving the needle in the next tier up from average.
Absolutely. And like you said, I think that sometimes people get a little bit crazy that, did we bring in superstars everywhere? No. And do I think all the free agent signings are going to work out? No. But when you bring in 17 and 18 guys, they all don't have to work out. We have the depth and flexibility that we have, big, competitive, strong NFL caliber guys fighting for playing time. That's a great situation to be in.
And it builds the foundation. And this was my point with Antonio Brown coming, right? Like everyone said, we need to have that game changer. And if you just plop a game changer onto a below average roster, I don't know that there's a ton of, we've seen Odell Beckham with the New York Giants, one of the biggest game changers there is in all of football. How many games difference was Odell Beckham to that roster last year? Not very many, right? So, but if you pluck Odell Beckham and put him on the Cleveland Browns, who have done a really good job of building up a good solid foundation of average to above average players across the board and building a more foundational roster. Now he makes a big difference. And I think that's what the Bills are doing, where heading into 2020, if they make this a big splash somewhere or really land on one of these draft picks who's a big time game changer, that game changer has more of an impact on an average roster than it does on the last year's Bills roster.
Yeah, and that's exactly the spot that we're in now is, I think people underestimate, like you said, you don't have to be a superstar to make a difference. And we've got a lot of guys who are going to make a difference.
Absolutely. So what else you got for us, man? Where can the people find you? You got, I know you're going to be on the show with me the next couple of weeks, and then you're filling in for me in 2 weeks when my family comes up. What else you got going on?
Got a lot of good things happening. Come and find me on Twitter. Spent a lot of time there arguing with a weird amount of Titans fans today. But come and find me at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Love to follow back Bills fans and have a good time. And you can always find me in the Cover One Premium Slack.
Absolutely. And you can find me there as well, and also online with all kinds of different fun takes and arguments going on at Aaron Quinn 716. You can find us Cover One at Cover1_1_ wherever your social media is. Just find Cover One. You know where to do and how to do that stuff. Make sure you go to wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to the podcast, leave a review. Hopefully it's a positive one and you like Greg's hair and you like the way I sound. But just go in and leave a review. That stuff really helps us a lot, you guys. While you're here over on YouTube, subscribe and click the little bell that notifies you when we go live or anytime videos come out. It's great. Eric's always putting out really nice content videos outside of the live show that we do here. So you're really going to want to subscribe and get notifications when stuff comes out from us. And then always head over to cover1.net. If you're on an Android app or on an Android phone or iOS phone, you can head to the App Store, download our app. That also notifies you of our content. We've got you covered in all the possible ways that we can get our content to you. So if you like the content we do and you like what we're all about, definitely head over to cover1.net. Go check out the premium membership right now for $10 for the entire year. It covers you. One payment of $10 covers you for the entire year to get premium access. It's a deal that you cannot beat. Once the season gets going and after this draft, things are just going to heat up in there. So I'm telling you guys right now, it's going to be the best $10 you spend. And the next best $10 you can spend is on Jordan Reed's draft guide. Pre-orders are available now. You can search Jordan Reed NFL. I think it is Jordan Reed NFL on Twitter or right on the Cover One page. You'll see it. He's got pre-orders right now for his draft guide are $10. The $10 goes to a charity in Raleigh for a hunger prevention charity. It's really an awesome deal. He's got over 200 draft prospects, full analysis. I mean, this is the draft guide to get you guys. I'm so excited to get my hands on this. I love Jordan's analysis. We've had him on the show. He does a lot with the Cover One podcast, the draft podcast. The guy's phenomenal. He's put in a ton of work into it. So if you love draft guides, this is one of the top ones to get. $10 and your money goes to charity. You really can't beat it. So check that out. Look for that coming on your Twitter feed. Other than that, guys, come back next week, same time, same place. We got some cool guests, I think, lined up, and we're going to keep doing these mock drafts every week and change up how that goes. So love having you in the chat. We really can't do this show without you guys. We really appreciate you coming by and all the support that you give us, and we'll catch you on the next one.